I got my bachelor's of architecture degree from Cal Poly San Luis Obispo um, back in the mid 80s. Actually had the good fortune of becoming good friends and having him as a mentor, my history of architecture instructor, who then took me to France and spent a total of 10 years living and working in France. I was supposed to go just for a 3-month internship and ended up being a 10-year experience, life experience.
Yeah.
Um, and then from there, applied to grad school, went on to Harvard University Graduate School of Design, got my master's of architecture degree from there, went back to France, and then realized that maybe it was time to come back to the States because I wanted to teach, but also do how open a practice. So in 1998, I moved back to Los Angeles after teaching for 3 years at Clemson University in South Carolina, in Clemson, South Carolina, and then moved back to LA, opened a practice with my partner, Alain Fievre, who's also French, and then started teaching at USC full time. I think the most important experience, which is very different from my education, was working in France. The difference in France is that the architect is seen as a kind of conceptor, someone who develops the ideas for a building. There was a lot of emphasis on design when working in an architecture firm in France, whereas in the United States, you have to cover the full gamut of responsibility.
What would you say are some of your core values as far as architecture goes?
I think that in many respects, I am an early 20th century architect, meaning that I still, even today, believe that the architect can design the whole entire project. So I believe in architecture design in total, meaning that not only are we responsible for building the envelope that houses the program and provides coverage and shelter for the user, but I think why we tend to work in high-end architectural projects is because we're also interested in detailing like the hardware for a door or a custom designed stair, which is how you and I met, or designing furniture that is specific to the project. And so in many ways, I think I relate more to those early 20th century European architects, Eero Saarinen, Gunnar Asplund, Alvar Aalto, who saw architecture as a kind of total design experience. I would even say Frank Lloyd Wright, who saw that architecture, the architect touched every dimension and every aspect of the design project. We always start by the research and collection of inspiring images and kind of ways of seeing things that were designed by other architects as a point of reference or starting point. Traditionally, we try to always engage our clients with full services, meaning that we go from schematic design or even start with a feasibility study, then go to schematic design, design development, construction documents, all the way through bidding and negotiation, permitting, and even construction and administration, so that we oversee the entire course of the design project from its very initial birth stage or initial stage of concept to its completion at the end.
So how do you collaborate with other people as you're doing your work? You mentioned that you're part of a firm, right? So you probably have several designers that you're working with, but how do you collaborate with them?
So one of the advantages of being someone who teaches full time is that I have an incredible access to young talent. And so I'm constantly inviting young designers and people, recent graduates from programs to work with us. Today, architects tend to focus exclusively more on the building itself, and then the other aspects are outsourced to other allied design professions like interior designers or landscape designers and so forth. But then there is a slew of other people that come in for specific tasks, model building, rendering, um, um, even project architects sometimes, who come in for a specific purpose. And then once that purpose has been completed, then they go on to other things. Working with people who are already involved in the creative dimensions,
Sure.
or work with allied creative fields, tend to be the best clients and collaborators. People, the further away they are from that nucleus of creativity, the more difficult it is to work with them. Considering how old I am and where I am in life and how I was educated, I still think that I hold on to that idea of the architect being the designer of all of the environment. Mid-century modernism is an incredible inspiration and force and influence in our work. I think gauging clients' expectations is a real challenge, because unlike everything else, developing a project is something that doesn't happen every day, and it doesn't happen to everyone. I would say there's probably 90% of our country that will never actually be involved in a design project with an architect. And that other 10%, it may happen once or twice, but it's not something that happens frequently. And I think one of the biggest challenge for us is making sure that we help our clients understand what is reasonable and possible within a given scope of time.
What kind of advice would you give to a young student of architecture?
Follow your heart and really begin to try to understand what inspires you most about the field. The architecture is a gigantic word and a gigantic profession with many different kinds of opportunities. And I think often what happens to young architects is that they get lost in that sea of possibilities and never actually fulfill their real true potential, because they somehow got locked into a system of working or thinking about just having a job. And I would say listening to yourself in that inner creative voice and using that to find the direction, your career path and direction, probably is the most important thing. Because there's going to be a point in your life when you have enough money and you have enough things, but are you happy? And are you happy with what you're doing? And I think that that's really the ultimate achievement, when you actually love the work that you're doing.